Host YouTube, the Sega Dreamcast is dead. There's this whole bit here about the downfall of Sega and their woes of going multi-platform, but if you can grasp why making a game for 3 consoles that you don't have ownership of is harder than making one version of a game on one that you do is easier, then you can't be helped, or maybe you're a child. And then I'd have to ask, why are you here? I say bad words sometimes. Instead, have this metaphor about game design being like building blocks. Let's say Sonic Adventure is a square. Then it's safe to say Sonic Adventure 2 would also be a square, albeit a little smaller, maybe a thicker color because it's more focused. Well, what about Sonic Heroes? That game is pretty different than the last two, so coming off of SA2, let's call it a triangle. It's also a little smaller, but all of these games have the same base when it comes to high-speed platforming, so they have the same texture even if they do feel a little different. Now, there's this mentality about Sonic games that they abandon ideas and don't grow from past experiences, and they're always trying completely new things while not polishing the things that worked. I think that mentality is shallow and ignorant. You can't reuse assets the way they do without having some form of consistency. If you were ever going to watch one of my videos, do it now. I'm not trying to tell you that all of these games are the same. I'm telling you that Sonic Heroes doesn't exist in a world without Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. It doesn't exist without the classic games. Everything that made the Sonic franchise what it was up to this point is packed into that game. It had to be. It was Sega's most important multi-platform game at the time, and despite its technical shortcomings, it proved itself. Again, I don't really like going into outside circumstances of my game analysis, but I'd also like to share the fact that Sonic Adventure DX came out 6 months before this game. Sonic Team typically handles 2 problems that will consistently follow them throughout their development time: being spread too thin, or not giving enough time to do things. Are the secret answer C, all of the above? Sonic Heroes is C. And while that's not inherently special to any video game development, Sonic is one of the biggest franchises that realized it was doing that and decided, hey man, we can't be charging full price for these video games, and cut themselves back. But it'll take a while before we get there. What about this game? What does it do? How is it different? Well, it starts off by letting us pick through one of 4 campaigns: normal mode, hard mode, easy mode, and mission mode. Why is it ordered like this? I can't tell you. I get why putting Sonic first, but why put Team Dark before Team Rose? Either way, I recommend Team Rose because it will force you to do the tutorial on startup. So Sonic Heroes is a game... right, the plot. I forgot about that. Well, Sonic Heroes is a very simple game. Team Rose is on the lookout for Sonic, who supposedly has the lost Froggy and Chocola-Chow. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles got an invitation to stop Eggman's new diabolical scheme in 3 days. Rouge is on the hunt for more treasure and unearths not only a recovered Shadow, but also awakens a deactivated E-Series robot, 123 Omega. Shadow and Omega are looking for answers and revenge, while Rouge still wants to get her hands on that treasure. Finally, the returning Chaotix are strapped for cash, and their detective agency gets a job from a mysterious client. Very simple, very straightforward, so it will be touch and go on the story as we run through the game. Honestly, I'm surprised Sonic Team decided to make a fully detailed tutorial. I guess they got tired of people not knowing how their games worked. But even without it, Seaside Hill and Ocean Palace are really cozy first levels, backed by the coast and checkerboarded for days. It really eases you into switching your characters and getting a grip on the controls, even if Sonic Heroes is slippier than SA1. Grand Metropolis and the Power Plant, however, get you up to speed with fighting enemies who now have health bars and flying. That's right, Return from Sonic Adventure is the ability to fly for a short distance. As for fighting, let's move on to Casino Park and Bingo Highway. The return of pinball is really frustrating with how this game handles collisions, but rolling down the bingo slide is pretty fun when it's not trying to kill you. And this is the first area where you run into enemies that can only be taken out with the power formation, but you'll need help with your flying type unless you can think outside the box to get some extra height. Rail Canyon and Bullet Station, however, bring back rail grinding, and you will be forced to deal with the differences of this game's engine with these levels. These rails just aren't as slick as they used to be. As a kid, I was pretty good at SA2, but when it came to this, I was always forced to a stop. But now that I know how the game works, I can get by pretty fine by just holding the B button down instead of tapping it repeatedly like I used to do. You have to really lean into these turns, even when it seems flat, unlike the last game where you got by just lightly tilting. But after this, we're halfway through the game, and thank God that last review was too long. But now that we're here, let's talk about the boss fights because they'll be repeating until we get to the final one. Also, plot rears its head for a little bit, we can talk about that too. As we run through the game, you fight Eggman and other teams. The Eggman boss fights are split between chases that are pretty fun. The Egg Hawk even stops for a second to give you a chance to beat it up. Robot Carnival is pretty much a test your combat skills, and the power-up orbs are your friends here. And the Egg Albatross is a chasing 3-staged boss fight, and you can pretty much attack him however you want on the main path, but be very careful about blowing him up in the parts where the path starts to split. But the last type of boss fight is against other teams. Sonic runs into Amy, Dark runs into Chaotix, and to be honest, I hate them. They're a little annoying. SA1's character bosses are super simple and super boring. SA2 had some sauce, but these ones are a toss-up, and if they'll be as simple as one, are just flat out annoying. It's supposed to work like a game of rock, paper, scissors with the different formations, but the answer is your speed character's tornado move and praying that the other characters don't have any rings, so they'll go flying out of the stage instead of just staggering back. That also affects you, so you need to pick up rings or you'll go flying out of the stage. As for the story, we're halfway through, so now's the time to sow some seeds of intrigue. The Eggman in our last boss fight was a fake and a distraction to get his air fleet of ships off of the ground. Even if our main heroes' 3 days are up, they'll still try to stop Eggman. As for Shadow and the others, there seems to be something off with their ship as well, but they still continue on their own personal search for the Doctor. Amy's team has decided Eggman is their real target, and while the Chaotix are still following orders, Vector is dialing in on what their job might really be about. Yet unknown to our first two teams, distracting them wasn't the only thing being done. Frog Forest and Lost Jungle is where the game starts to ramp up. Everything we learned up until now is in play: team switching, rail grinding, and an even harder enemy that can only be damaged in power formation. The good thing is that flying formation can also stun them. Team Blast is your friend. It's a screen clear that gives each team a different lasting effect as the bar depletes itself. It's really good. Some are better than others, but they're all fairly decent if used at the right time. Hang Castle and Mystic Mansion are freaky. They're so different from any level you've played in a Sonic game yet. The castle turns upside down, you have to find hidden switches and secret doors all around, and there are even invisible floors. This might be the most Sonic Adventure style level in this game by pure design alone. Strong Amy level vibes. Watch out for the stronger versions of the last super enemy though. They can only be hit in their weak spot after removing their helmet, and they're even more annoying. This is also the last level where I can mention the bobsled mechanic. You get into this device that automatically runs through the stages. Speed characters speed it up, flying characters let you jump, and power characters steer it. Earlier types let you move left and right, so losing a flying or power character pretty much you meant death depending on how far in you were on the track. But for this trolley system where you run on rails, as long as you have flight, you should be fine. It's a cute little gimmick that reminds me of the kart racing from the last game, even though it's not quite the same. And speaking of last chances to bring things up, let's talk about the Team Blast as we go through Robot Storm. It's a universal screen clear move. You build up the meter by collecting rings, destroying enemies, and just performing character actions. You can even cheat by getting the flight formation and pressing the attack button and the switch button at the same time to glitch the meter game. But what's most important is each team has their own gimmick attached to it. Team Rose is the most useful in that it levels everyone else up once, it gives you a shield, and makes you invincible. Team Dark is the most situational because it freezes time. It's perfect for Eggman boss fights, but everywhere else it can kinda get in the way because things like doors won't open, or in Robot Storm's case, the next round of enemies won't show up, but you can cancel it by pushing the button again. Team Sonic is a basic screen clear, but its extra ability is that it lets Sonic use the light attack from the last game. You just jump in the air and press the B button. Also, when Tails does Thunder Shoot with Sonic, it also works, but hitting the button again seems to cancel it when you shoot out Knuckles. But I think Team Chaotix has the most interesting mechanic. When they destroy enemies, they get ring boxes, and they continue to get them for destroying enemies as the meter goes down. That means it's really easy to build their meter back up, or outright get it again on activation if there's enough enemies around. If you aren't cheating, knowing when to use the Team Blast will be more helpful than using it willy-nilly. The game outright baits you into using it near the end of the game, and at the end of the game we are. The Egg Flea is trying to kill you by the sheer volumes of cannons trying to gun you down, even introducing a new type of enemy even at the end. They block your attacks, it's really annoying. Baiting them into attacking is the easiest way to deal with them because they shield everything, even Thunder Shoot. And as for Final Fortress, it somehow makes itself even harder, but these two levels somehow manage to make you use every move in this game to its fullest, whether it be through combat or through platforming, and it's fantastic. You know, if you know what you're doing and you don't mess up your skips. And as for our final boss, Egg Emperor, he's pretty fun. He puts you through your paces, a chase that leads into a battle plateau that then rinses and repeats itself. The game is practically begging you to build up your Team Blast meter to deal with this guy. His attacks are annoying when he's chasing you, but if you do the team movements to level up, Thunder Shoot is your best friend to get past his shield and to do consistent damage. Don't worry about the speed level up, it's not worth it, and they give you the power one for free. And that's Sonic Heroes' basic story. There's more to it that we'll get into, but it's a short game that wants you to play it 4 times, and each of those times are mostly difficulty settings, so let's get back into discussing the design mentality team by team. For starters, Team Rose is the game's easy mode. You fight fewer enemies and go through about half of the level compared to the other teams. They managed to find both Froggy and Chocola, but they also seem to have had their data downloaded by the mysterious goo. Team Dark's hard mode is where you fight the most enemies in harder combinations than anyone else, and the stages may give you an extra little bit at the end. At the end of it all, the only thing Rouge found were more Shadow clones. She tries to get things off her chest to Omega, but he just reassures her that if there are clones, then the original must exist out there somewhere, and Shadow gives you a bit of hope that he's the real deal. Team Sonic is the normal mode, and personally my favorite because it just flows the best. You switch your characters more often, and it's mostly in the service of moving forward and skipping areas you don't want to fight in. They did what they came here to do, beat Eggman. It's simple, but it's nice. As for Team Chaotix, they are a modified mission mode from our past 2 games. In fact, Sonic Adventure DX expanded its mission mode, so it being the core of this game style shouldn't really be that much of a surprise. The most interesting thing it does is add a mission where you aren't allowed to alert enemies, but everything else is your standard: find X amount of item, get X number of rings. Actually, the kill all enemy mission and blow out all the torches ones can kick rocks, but for enemies it's just the fact that you can miss them. And for torches is also the fact that you can miss them. I don't like the ones where there's a lot of things I can miss, and it's all of them, do all the thing. But most of the collection missions are fine because they give you double the amount of X item you need to finish them. It's not going to stay like this, you will be thankful looking back. But at the end of their story they found out that their client was Dr. Eggman, who was captured on his own ship. What? Why? How? Also, he can't pay, get his ass. While I have a fun enough time with each of these teams, even I understand that essentially playing the same game 4 times in a row can be exhausting. I played this game 8 times in a row because my recordings got corrupted, and I hated that second playthrough until I got back to Team Sonic again. but this design screams Sonic 3 and Knuckles to me. In that game, Sonic was normal, Tails was easy, and Knuckles was hard mode, and yeah, that game didn't force you to play as all of them. But I did. I even played as Sonic alone. Listen, I grew up on SNES games that had dead internal batteries, and a PlayStation 1 with no memory card for most of its use life. I can play this game 4 times and not be bothered. I'll admit that I'm the freak here, but each run is just about 2 hours long. Listen, my greatest piece of advice is to play this game at least 1 team a week. Split your playthrough up over a month and it will probably feel way better than just trying to force your way through it if you don't like it that much. I don't know why you're playing it if you don't like it that much, but whatever. Also, this game can be pretty frustrating, so you might need to take a break every once in a while. But let's talk about that frustration. Special stages have made their return. I like them, but oh boy, frustrating. The half pipe has turned into a full pipe, and it would be so cool if these controls actually worked. I can almost get them to work consistently, but it's only almost. You get caught on turns, you lose control, you twitch every which way, it just feels bad. But that's not a problem with the special stage, that's a problem with this video game, because we've seen them control better before this in 3D, and this one specifically afterwards in 3D. So this design of the special stage, the idea behind it, is very, very good. When not in Sonic Heroes, you have to find special keys within the stages and finish a stage with it on you. If you get hit, i.e. if you lose rings, you will lose the key, and there are only about 2 or 3 keys per stage. It would have been nice to stack keys, but no, we can't fit everything into our special pocket. If you get the key in the first stage of a zone, you get to just run through the special stage, trying to make it to the end. If you get the key in the second stage of the zone, you race for the Chaos Emerald, trying to catch up and grab it before you reach the end. I think it's really smart how you can test out the stage's layout before going for the emerald. In the first version, you have a time limit to get to the end. You collect these orbs that give you a speed boost while also putting more time on the clock. The spike balls from Sonic 2 return, but they slow you down considerably in this game and they take away your boost meter. In the first version of the special stage, there's also this choke point where there's no orbs. There's a Chow that runs along with you dropping orbs on you, but there's also a Dark Chow dropping down spike balls. It's all about getting a good run and having a good consistency. The better you do, the better your run is, the more extra lives you get for the first version. Then you take that knowledge and you go into getting the Chaos Emerald. If this game worked correctly, getting the Chaos Emerald would technically be easier than just going through the stage normally, because you don't have to go through the whole thing. That choke point in the first version of the special stage turns into a second wind in the second version, where they litter you with orbs hoping you catch back up even if you mess up the first part. While chasing the emerald is straightforward enough, the first zone breaks things up with fun gimmicks like springs and zip lines. If I had to give advice on getting the emerald, it would be to switch the power formation character and tap the boost button. Even though holding it is better, it's just that you go a little slower so it's easier to control, they don't move as fast so it's easier to control. It's all about being easier to control. But if you can somehow find that sweet spot, whether it be power or speed formation, you will collect each of these emeralds within seconds. If I'm able to edit this while showing off everything else, I should have gotten most of them by now. I think I've gotten fairly used to these controls, but even then I can't find a sense of consistency. They expect you to use the speed character, and while they aren't the worst, that would be flying, it's still just controls very poorly. They expect you to run on the ceiling sometimes. They put orbs up there. I can hardly do a loop, and when I do run on the ceiling, it's hardly on purpose. If there's any tip that I can give you, it's move the stick gently and move into the turns. But getting all the Chaos Emeralds unlocks the last story for this video game. Don't worry about doing it in story mode, you can get them in the level select. This whole setup feels very Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It's just hanging over this video game like a warm fuzzy blanket. The game makes sure to go out of its way to tell you about these things by giving you a splash screen at the end of the credits every time you beat the story with the team. And even though you can't skip the credits, they're kinda easy to miss. If you go to the bathroom at the wrong time, it will just pass you by. Doesn't help that the final story is also off screen to the side. I know a handful of people that didn't complete their Sonic games even though they unlocked everything. This is for people like them. At the end of it all, everything comes to a head. The real mastermind reveals himself to be Metal Sonic. What? Oh, Neo Metal Sonic, my mistake. Wait, no, Metal Madness, I see. Pick a name, bro. Anyway, with all the data it's copied, Neo Metal turns into this thing. I can see a little bit of chaos in there, I see what you're going for, but all hope seems lost. If only we had all 7 Chaos Emeralds. Oh boy, they always come in right when you need them. They split the final boss fight into 2 phases. Team Sonic will go super while everyone else will buy them time. Phase 1 is fighting as each team to do some damage. You have to attack the obvious weak point with any attack that doesn't correspond to its color. If it's blue, speed won't work, yellow flying, red for power, it's easy. It's just sometimes attacks don't want to register, especially Thunder Shoot. Just because it doesn't work the first time doesn't mean it won't work, it just means that you didn't really hit it right. Sorry, I blamed you, let me blame the game. It didn't register right, the game is wrong. And then you never want to hit it with a speed type character because why jump over a bottomless pit when you have 2 safer options? Don't trust this game's funky collision detection. That being said, it's very much worth it to look around the boss arena because there are power-ups. Team Rose gets Team Blast items, and the other 2 get some free power-up orbs. The Team Blast meter even carries over to the next team, meaning meter gain is never wasted. The second phase, Metal Overlord, is a mix of both Sonic Adventure 1 and 2's final boss fights. Like SA2, you're just in this massive area to move around, but like in SA1, you have to collect your rings as you fight the boss without switching to someone else. You can't do damage to this boss, so it's all a matter of building up your Team Blast meter and matching his attacks with the right type of character. I think it's really cool how Metal uses a mix of attacks that you've seen before throughout the game, and he even pulls off Chaos Control to waste some of your time. As long as you collect your rings and deal with his attacks, you should be fine, but the balloons will run out after a while, but he should probably be on his last hit by then anyway, so I recommend using Tails to get them. Thunder Shoot's the best. But after that, we've beaten the game. Metal returns to normal, everyone runs off to their next adventure, and we're Sonic Heroes! Roll credits. I think overall Sonic Heroes is a fun little romp. It's the perfect type of game that needed to be made as Sonic's first big multi-platform game, something soft, easy, and a great introduction to the cast. But it's also a perfect homage to the classic style games in its presentation. To be honest, there's not a lot of story to go into, so I'm just gonna roll it into the presentation bit of my review as we move forward because I think they really mix well together. I honestly think from a design standpoint, as in playing through the game and the design of the levels and their layouts, Heroes is a nice combination of SA1 and 2, but from an artistic view, it also incorporates the classic art style the best out of almost any modern Sonic game to date. I wouldn't say the last 2 games cut back on the fantastical elements of the series, but instead they dialed up the realism. This game, however, dials that back down. It's brighter, there's more colors, things are more abstract than before. A palace set in the sea is a new and fun aesthetic. If you thought Pumpkin Hill was spooky, Hang Castle and Mystic Mansion take the cake. Who was it on Sonic Team that loved Halloween so much? We're gonna see it again, and I love it. I just want to know who it was. The characters outright say it this time. And that leads into something else that I love about this game that most people hate. It's how the characters interact and talk with each other. In this game, the banter can get pretty annoying if you keep dying on the same part and you have to keep hearing the same lines over and over again, but just get good. It's as simple as that. They'll comment on the things that are currently happening, stages, a bit more generic dialogue like, look at all those Eggman's robots, you know, stuff like that. And outside of the Omochao tutorial, they are your natural tutorial that will constantly tell you how the game works, even near the end of the game, and I can't be mad because I know people that need it. I really think this diegetic way of giving us our information throughout the game is really fun and interesting. Diegetic as in, our characters are perceiving these directions the same as us, the player. In SA1 it was to call, and even if you could say that they weren't perceiving the same directions, they did perceive that ball of light. In SA2 it was Omochao who I forgot to mention in that game because he was doing my job, and it's hard to say if he's diegetic, but characters can interact with him and throw him around and he will react to that, so I guess? But either way, I just think it's a neat way for the characters to continue to express themselves and interact in ways that we haven't seen before. And it's not just restricted to the in-game dialogue, it's also for the cutscenes, whether they be CG or in-game themselves. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles probably express this the best, cheering each other on, pulling each other forward, and even teasing each other as they run through the levels. Team Rose, however, is a bit more peaceful, even if Amy can be a bit much. This interaction with Cream is funny because it's not localized correctly. Instead of questioning Cream as if she's clueless, the Japanese version is a lot more threatening, daring the small rabbit to finish her thought. But that's what happens when your story gets repeatedly translated back and forth like a game of telephone during the scripting process. Sonic Team is still doing this, by the way. It's fine, it's just more communication, like always. And while it may not be one-to-one, it's funny either way. Unlike SA2, where the sarcasm is just lost in that scene and there's no joke to back it up. Team Dark is a serious bunch with two no-nonsense characters being pulled along by Rouge the Bat. I like that all of these teams have their own dynamics. The speed characters are on point, but that doesn't mean they're the leader of their respective groups. Rouge is the boss, and she definitely shows that she is. While Omega is a one-tracked Eggman wrecking robot machine, he will defer to her and Shadow at their request. But as a character, Shadow would be the most interesting in this game if it decided to do anything with him, like do anything interesting in this game with him. Presumed dead, yet miraculously found alive, he now has amnesia, which is lame, to be quite honest. It's great when his past traits come out, like saving Rouge at the start of the game, but it's just a lazy retread of his secondary plot point in SA2 in my honest opinion. But while I don't care for his personal story, I do like the way he's expressed in this game, how he acts, how he talks, I think is very well done. I didn't really get to mention this in the last game, but before all of this anti-hero stuff, Shadow was just an evil Sonic. A bit more standoffish, but he's just a snarky, willful, and I guess you could replace Sonic's confidence with pride, but his pride is at a point where it really doesn't matter. There's not really that big of a difference in how they express that. I'm the fastest thing alive. I'm the one and only ultimate life form. Yes, both of you are very cool. It's just the whole, even if I don't have my memories, I'm still the ultimate life form shtick runs kinda hollow. I mean, you don't remember that. Why do you care? Rouge, how much did you gas him up? Team Chaotix is a deep cut that I didn't know about when this game came out because who owned Knuckles Chaotix? The 5 of you who owned a Sega 32X, please put your hands down. The retooling of these characters is super fun looking back. I went and read the manual of that game, and did you know Espio was a detective, and now he's also a ninja, which is still kind of in line with his character from before? Vector's a bit gruffer, but he's just as kind as always. Charmy is a brat now, but before he was just a little guy that liked to go fast and check on flowers. Their interactions are what help them shine. Espio may be the straight man while Vector and Charmy bicker, but the Croc shows you that throughout the journey, he's the brains behind the agency. Which is weird because Espio was the one who was the detective. Whatever, that was on the fan wiki, that could be wrong. As for Metal Sonic, he's pretty good. Gone from silent copy wanting to just beat Sonic to mouthy mechanical ruler who will do anything they can to prove that they are indeed the real Sonic the Hedgehog. A bit of CD, a bit of the OVA, and a bit of Chaotix all come together to make up our Metal Overlord. The act of locking up Eggman and biding his time is just the right amount of agency to make him feel like a real good villain. And then you have their team themes, which are amazing and capture the mood of each one perfectly. Once again, each one having their own style of music to express that team's quirkiness and individuality, but the stage themes also don't slack, moving back into fitting the mood of the stage itself, then matching its character in that certain theme like SA2. Casino Park is energetic and electronic, the power plant is as mechanical as it is rhythmic, and Final Forces is your climactic final stage making you feel both dread and eagerness at the same time. This can also be said for the final boss music as well. It fits both you, Sonic, and Metal Sonic at the same time, and if you don't like Sonic Heroes, then you're just not fun. The song. I'm talking about the song. You cannot like the game. I mean, you're probably still not as fun as you could be, but all of these callbacks make Sonic Heroes feel like not just a sequel to the adventure games, but even the classics as well. Honestly, it might just be the best 3D conversion we had, and by that I mean being an actual 3D conversion, and not just being 2D Sonic in 3D. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles are boiled down to their basic traits, expanded on, and given a combat twist specifically for this game, so let's move on to the gameplay because I've been glossing over it long enough. Alright, while Sonic Heroes may be on a brand new engine, it's still built out the back that is Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, and by that I mean the way this game is designed, the entirety of how this game is designed. I think the level design is the best of both worlds. It's open, you can clearly see your routes, and while they are more spread out than 2, shortcuts are just as hidden and difficult to manage like in the last game as well. For example, there's this giant winding turn that leads into a boss arena. You can just skip it and go right into the fight, but as Team Sonic, you can go to the top of this turn, get a frog to make it rain, and you get a grind rail to skip it. Other characters, however, can find power-ups and goodies up there as well. Team Sonic gives you the SA2 mentality, while everyone else is getting 1s. It takes SA1's things you can find and combines it with SA2's things you can do quite a bit. And the game clearly acknowledges it. Even as early as Seaside Hill, you have these breakable blocks that you can just jump or fly over, completely ignoring them. Team Chaotix has a mission of finding hermit crabs, and one of them is sitting on top of this pillar next to these blocks. 4 teams in, the designers are expecting you to just casually skip certain bits. But they also play with that idea, so they make you hit every block anyway because there's probably a hermit crab under one of them. But for everyone else, you can find alternate routes, goodies, or just maximize skipping by learning the layout and the level like any old Sonic game. But to get through all of this level design, you have to deal with the gimmick that is Sonic Heroes, playing as 3 characters at once and fighting a bunch of enemies. Even if you can skip them sometimes, you'll be attacking again and again, and it can feel like a bit much. Enemies now have health bars, meaning that they take more than 1 hit to kill. As early as Act 2, you'll run into cases that you'll have to destroy enemies to unlock. It wants you to fight, and you will be doing it. But even then, it takes a while for the game to make you feel like you're in a true gauntlet without an exit. Locking doors with enemies isn't anything new to this series, even for Sonic-styled gameplay, but figuring out how to fight this many different types of enemies is what makes Sonic Heroes, Sonic Heroes. You can alleviate this a lot by powering up your characters with ability orbs. There's one for each type, and there's a free one you get for each checkpoint, so keeping track of them throughout the stage will really help you get through it better, but dying becomes a bit worse because you lose all of them. It's nothing you need, but it definitely helps a lot. But even this fighting can be mixed with platforming, and that leads into the ability types themselves and what makes them different. First off, let's talk about power formation because that's what we'll be doing most, fighting. They do more damage than the other formations where they can take out weaker enemies in 1 hit, unlike their counterparts who needs to be powered up. As they level up, they get a finishing AoE attack that does high damage and lingers longer the more it's powered up. Then they can shoot their teammates for a stronger attack. Knuckles and Omega have to jump to do this, while Big and Vector do it on the ground in their combo. That being said, their jump attack turns into a body slam. I kept bringing up Knuckles fighting in the last 2 games for a reason. Knuckles is at his best in this game in terms of being the one who fights in the group. I feel like enemies only have health bars to make this type more viable. But as for platforming, they add in Knuckles Glide into the triangle dive. Don't use it for lateral movement, it sucks. You're playing a 3D game and they very much are aware of that. No more Sonic Adventure nonsense. But it still can do damage to enemies. It's not useful in that sense, but it's funny. Overall, I like this for Knuckles and the other fighters. I think the problem this game runs into is that it becomes a bit too much, and some of the enemies themselves are a bit too much. But in terms of just the ability that these characters have, I think it's great. Flying formation is your tactical formation. In terms of movement, you do skips, you keep yourself safe in tricky areas, but when it comes to fighting, you're immobilizing your enemies for the other types to deal the finishing blow. That is until it levels up to max, then it's just as good as power formation for normal enemies, and perfect for dealing with the flying enemies that the other 2 have a hard time reaching. Just like gliding, flying is also dialed back and you can see it with the flight meter. Unlike SA1, you come to an almost halt when you run out of speed, which is probably why they show it to you. You'll want to learn to jump as far as you can and as high as you can before you start flying to move the furthest. As for the rest of their differences, Charmy has this mechanic with flowers where if he opens it up, it teleports them to different places, so it's just a Team Chaotix mechanic. But personally, it only shows up when each of these characters are put by themselves. Very rarely will you have a flying type character on their own, but when you do, they each get their own individual attacks. Both power and flying formations are slower than speed, but they de-incentivize flying by making it the slowest. Sure, you move around better and you will be switching to it constantly, but you'll never want to just be in it just to move forward. Unless, you know, you're on a precarious ledge. And as for fighting, once powered up, I think it's fair to compare it back to the Mech and Gamma shooting style stages, except instead of holding the button down, you toss your friends who home in on the enemies around them. And last but not least, the main attraction, speed formation. They have the most differences between them compared to the others. The homing attack returns, but because there are health bars, it doesn't kill in one hit. The trick is to hold the jump button long enough so your partners will join you in stacking the damage until you power it up. You just have to also make sure that they're all together. Each character has a tornado attack, but that's also where the differences start to show up. Shadow and Sonic will home in on their target to throw them off balance, remove a shield, or flip the enemy over so the others can do more damage. Amy sends her tornado flying forward and SBO's has theirs centered on him, but it will also turn him invisible and undetectable to enemies that haven't spotted him yet, and on the rare occasions where you run into lasers, he will also become intangible to them. Well, technically I think he'd be reflecting them, so the idea of science is in there somewhere. Everyone but Amy can do the new triangle jump where you can jump from wall to wall, with SBO being able to be stuck on the wall. Neat, but it doesn't matter much because you could just continually jump from wall to wall with Sonic or Shadow and pretty much do the same thing. Instead, Amy gets a hammer twirl when holding the jump button in the air, and you'd think it'd be useless, but if you combine it with the tornado hammer, you can do it again and get some good distance. She can even homing attack after doing all of this, so her aerial movement is still some of the best for a non-flight character. There's also the replacement for the spin dash, the Rocket Excel. The game expects you to use it like twice. It's a speed boost with the tornado properties of the level 3 homing attack, but it's like, whatever. You hold B, you gather everyone around you, they push you forward. If they aren't gathered, you do a solo attack, Sonic and Shadow do a slide kick, Amy comes to a stop due to a hammer attack, and SBO will throw a shuriken. Remember that when SBO's alone, it's very useful. But yeah, Rocket Excel, Sonic and Shadow can still do the light speed dash though. Can't kill with it in this game. Not that like you needed to, it was just neat in the last game when it happened. So, how do all of these bits come together? The game will throw enemies at you relentlessly and ask you to use all of your skills to move forward as well. You punch through enemies and blocks on your path. You shoot down flying enemies and also switch formations to activate switches. Speed is nothing new you haven't done before. Homing attack chains still exist even if enemies do have health bars. And there's also light speed dash tricks for Sonic and Shadow if you lock in hard enough. Both in battle and platforming, the game will be asking you to switch quite a bit if you want to stay efficient. Yes, power types will run into enemies that will only be damaged by them, but even speed and flying types also have their fair share of enemies built for them, such as the shielded enemies, which the game recommends you use your tornado move to deal with, but your power formation is more than enough to deal with the basic and advanced enemies. It's the middle ones that are kind of annoying with their breakable shields, but even with a level 2 power type, you aren't really forced to switch, and if your speed character is level 3, well, it's GG easy, tornado property, get that shield out of my face. The flight formation enemies have the most diversity of any type of enemies in this game. In fact, the game expects you to use speed and power formation to deal with them if your flight formation isn't powered up enough, but it will also discourage or encourage depending on the type that they are. And one even shoots out spikes to discourage the use of speed formation. The game will force you to learn its mechanics, so if you aren't paying attention, you're going to have a bad time. Such as the game outright telling you that the power formation can damage the hammer enemies, so only later in my life did I even try to use Thunder Shoot and found out the basic ones can be paralyzed. As I said before, the E2000 series robots are annoying, but the hammer enemies teach you the lesson of baiting the attack. The game teaches you how to deal with these enemies, and dealing with them in these types of ways can be rewarding, or at the very least not as taxing. That being said, there is one mechanic in this game that's really annoying and works as it's mostly intended. Your teammates can be knocked out. Not like being captured by that special robot, it's just when they're hit, you can't switch to them or even use them for a bit. When you're just standing around, it's kind of annoying, and I get the idea behind punishing you for attacking with your teammates at the wrong time, but some of the enemies just have an active hitbox on at all times, like the hammer guy, so if you shoot wrong, instead of stunning him, your character will hit the hammer and you'll be able to use them for a while. And with how janky this game controls sometimes, it doesn't feel fair. Now because flight and power formation needs your teammates more than anything, they recover faster, so it's only really something you'll notice in speed formation, or if you want to switch really soon and you're just like, why isn't my button working? I get why it's in the game, it's perfect for the team boss battles, but it didn't need to be put in normal gameplay. I like switching in this game, and some enemies are flexible enough where you don't have to switch if you know how to deal with them or are leveled up enough. Some even change depending on the skills you use on them, like the witches. I think this is the best enemies with health bars has ever been used in the series, even compared to something like Frontiers, which is saying a lot because other than that unleashed in this game, I'm pretty sure everything else is way worse and a waste of time. But what might not be a waste of time is the return of extra missions. This time there are only one extra mission for each stage with each team. The different mission types from the last game are split up by team this time. Team Sonic is a race against the clock, still having to get a good score like last time. Team Dark, however, is a time-based mission where you have to kill 100 enemies in the level. Don't worry if you get to the end before you finish, just like last time, the gold ring will take you back to the start to continue your run. Team Rose has a ring-based mission where instead of 100 rings, you need to collect 200 rings. It's easy, don't worry about it. As for Team Chaotix, their extra missions are stage dependent. They are modified from their base missions. If you had a mission to find a certain number of items, this time you gotta find all of them. If the mission was to go to the end, you might have to do so undetected like in Frog Forest or Egg Fleet, and in stages where that was already the case, you get a time limit. But the most annoying is still the blow out the torches missions, because instead of the red ones, it's the blue ones, and while there may be less, it's not better. It's not better. It's not. But if there is one good thing about these collection missions, it's that even if you die, you keep the ones you found when you get back to the checkpoint. It's the fact that these are specifically called challenge missions that make swallowing the pill of having to get everything go down a bit easier, but some of these hiding spots are annoying. I'm talking about you, first hermit crab. How am I supposed to see that ledge? It's really hard. I don't care if the characters say something, how am I supposed to know they're not talking about the first easily seeable hermit crab? As for getting A-ranks in this game, it might be the fact that you have to fight so much and there are so many ways to get points, you just kinda stumble into them if you don't die in the middle of the stage. Heck, if you die early enough, you still might get it. It's this balancing act between moving fast and going out of your way to kill everything in your sight that's hard to manage. I'd prioritize fighting over going fast myself, always collect power-up orbs even if you're full because they give you points. The combo bonus now works on a timer considering flying and power types can't do consecutive hits like speed and gunner characters could in SA2. And getting A-ranks is nowhere near as hard or gimmicky like in the last game either. Everyone plays the same game, so you're always getting used to the system and the new engine. Even with the Chaotix, it's just a matter of remembering where your items and enemies are. This game even introduced the Rainbow Ring trick points, which we still see to this day, so that's neat. But what do you get for A-ranking in this game? What do you get for poisoning the minds of people who look back on SA2 thinking they have to get all A-ranks in that game? You get super hard mode. I played through this a little bit once. I'm not doing it now because you don't get anything at the end, but it's as it says, it's super hard mode. Even just 3 stages in, you can see how sadistic some of this design is. It will fling you over pits into lightspeed dash chains and you will have to remember to hold up because there is momentum in this game, it's just dialed back from before. Still here, but different. If you disagreed with any of my takes about the level design and how the game wants to teach you to learn different things and how to move through it, Super Hard Mode will tell you that I'm right. But for even more fun options to do, you can once again listen to the in-game music. You can actually watch the cutscenes this time, though it's just the CG ones and not the in-between stage ones. 2-player mode returns with a bunch of new, modes. The PC version is the workaround this time. You can do a bunch of different races and battles. The Sonic Heroes multiplayer scene is in fact very cold and very dead, and I've only seen these stages used in fan games more so than this one. But you can race, fight, drive a bobsled with different variations on all of those things. It does do my favorite thing in Sonic games where it changes the time of day. Seaside Hill in the sunset and the city at night look really nice, and I just want to keep changing the time of day, but like, give me the power, let me do it, let me set it. Why is Sonic R the only game that gives me what I want? But like I said at the very start of this review, this game has been pared down, so in terms of things to do, that's it. But before we get to our big overview, let me get to one big negative I've just been sprinkling in this entire review, and it's very obvious. Sonic Heroes runs a new game engine, and this game engine is heavily based in Sonic Adventure, but where Sonic Adventure 2 was more tighter in controls, Sonic Heroes is looser than the original. But to be honest, I think that's fine. I think how they move really helps with the formations and their animations. It's the collision detection that is extra awful and what sets me off. Characters freak out on edges, they get caught on uneven geometry at high speeds. 3D Sonic games have this design where characters catch themselves before they fall off a ledge, it's still in this game. It's the worst it's ever been. I've never fallen off a ledge more in a 3D Sonic game than this one. Power formation with Knuckles and Omega is a risk sometimes, they'll just fall off. It might be the most obvious in the special stages, but it's also super obvious in the casino stages where controlling your character feels like ass. And the best way to get through them is to try and hug the edges as hard as you can because they just kinda magnetize to them and roll up them. It's weird. The way this game feels drags it down completely, especially because it's based in the adventure system. But because that's what they're trying to emulate in this new engine, you can still perform your adventure-like tricks despite itself. You still gain speed by going down slopes, you still ramp jump like you did in the previous games. Grinding is way worse, but it still has the same principles behind it. You just have to try harder and not succumb to the fear. Your skills will carry over, and the design is based around that at times. And speaking of flinging yourself in the air, this game, despite itself, has the best air control of any Sonic game I think I've ever played. In fact, being in the air is the safest place to be in this game. Did your lightspeed dash mess up because you clipped the ground as you reached the edge? Jump before you do it. Want to use the power formation but it's a really tight space and you don't want to fall off? Jump. But there's something just relaxing about bouncing on an enemy to death as you let go of the control stick. It's floatier than adventure, and for this game, it's perfect. But even more perfect, at least on a design standpoint, I think out of any Sonic games, possibly even the classic ones, this is just Sonic the Hedgehog, the video game. And I'm not talking about 06. Multiple gameplay styles with their own levels? Well, now the styles are formations, and they all play at the same time. Teams are difficulty based, but that's just Sonic 3 and K. What about treasure hunting? A bit of that got moved into the chaotics. What about the mech shooting? A bit of that got moved into flight formation. What about Amy's puzzle platforming? Halloween Zone. Ah, but fishing though. I mean, technically... Listen, I said so at the start. I'm not here to tell you that these games aren't different. SA1 and 2 are different. Sonic 1, 2, and 3 are different. But it's this game that holds up the stupid mentality that Sonic games have no consistency because of the extra things these games do to fill themselves out keeps changing. You know, those things that we used to call gimmicks. I get that some gimmicks carry over and some don't, but that's how design works. You'd expect a different one per game, but because only a handful of them are similar, and they're not even all that similar to begin with if you actually deep dive into them, when things change people's brains start to fry. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like on it letting me know how you feel. Dislike it, letting me know how you feel. Comment about it, telling me how you feel. Or share it with a friend just to get them to think about it just a little bit more. You can't just ask how your games are different. You need to think through why they're different. How does that affect the similarities? Where do those similarities come from? And how do they all affect this game? That way, you might be able to appreciate aspects that get refined or the actual new things that get added no matter how small they might be. Sonic Heroes is the culmination of everything we've had up until this point. You may not have the brevity of the classic games, but it has their aesthetic. You may not have the treasure hunting and mech stages from the last two games, but you sure do have Sonic's overall level design mentality. You may fight more than you ever had before, but our characters are still designed like they were in the last two games. And the extra content is the same as the last two games. Sonic Heroes is not a sequel to Sonic Adventure 1 and Sonic Adventure 2, but it's pretty damn close.